All right, good morning. We have the Maimer Adon Olam Asher Malach in Kuntras, Sefer Maimer Kuntresim. And it asks the obvious question, how Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzer Nivra. What it means? First of all, it's relevant to Rosh Hashanah, because on Rosh Hashanah, this is we made God a king. We got into a king. God didn't have to create the world. Before the world was created, there was no time, there was no space, there was no energy. You want to say there was no potential. It was just pure truth, and we have no way of comprehending. We can't even comprehend the spiritual. We're saying God created the spiritual. There's all these levels of spiritual. So that's called, the world is called the Yetzur. That's called the creation of the world. So we say, Adon Olam Asher Malach, that God, that the master of the world, he ruled before anything was created. So the obvious question is, how can a king rule over nothing? Doesn't make any sense. There was no thing. Nothing had been created.
A king without a kingdom is not a king.
A king with nothing. Not without a kingdom. Let's say, right, if a person decides, I want to be the king over rocks. I want to be the king over animals. Right? I'll be the king over the trees. I'll be the king of, say, okay, maybe there's like these cartoon movies, Walt Disney, where, the trees all dance and everything like that. That's a bit of a nut, but okay. If the person says, I am the king over nothingness, what is that? It sounds like a John Paul Sartre book or something. Huh? Right, a comedy act. Right. The infinitely year-old man. But it doesn't make any sense. How can you? But that's what we say. There's this poem we say. It's in the how do you call the liturgy of our prayers. So we say it every morning in the beginning of the day. All right, so here we say that God he ruled, he was Adon Olam, now he's the Adon Olam, he's the master of the world. Adon Olam, God is the king of the world. We say it in our blessings. A Jew is supposed to make 100 blessings every day. You make blessings over what you eat, you make blessings in the prayers. You make morning blessings when you wake up in the morning, that thank you, you gave me eyes, and you gave me, etc. So you make all these blessings. So God is the king. We say, and every blessing we say, Melech Olam. God, you are the king of the universe, the king of the universe. That's the job of the Jewish people, is to show the whole world, the world is not a jungle, there's a king. And the king is not just ruling over us, he's creating us. This is absurd, but it's true. That's what the Jewish people really believe, that God is creating us. See, here we are. Here we are, and this creation is really being created by a creator. And he keeps creating it. He's been creating it for, according to Judaism, 5,780 years almost. According to the non-Jews, right, or to the non-religious people, God's been creating the universe for billions of years. That's amazing. Trillions of years, quadrillions, what are they? That's pretty outstanding. So we say, Adon Olam, you are the king of the universe. God, you're the king of the universe. King of the universe means you create everything and you control everything, and you gave us this gift of free will that we can choose. It's mysteries. But what does that mean that you ruled? You were the king before anything was created. Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzur Nivra, that you ruled before anything was made. How can it possibly be such a thing? So that doesn't make any sense. Good. Then the Rebbe points out another thing. In order to be a king, you have to be a king over subjects that are somewhat similar to you. Right? Like I said, if a person wants to be the king over the rocks, the king over the trees, the king over that doesn't make any sense. That's not. People get admitted to mental institutions because of that, right? Become mentalist. I'm the king of the rocks, I'm the king of the trees, I'm the king of the... Okay, maybe something like from a rock and roll song or something, but it doesn't make any sense. How could God... So he said, so first of all, number one question, how could God be the king before anything was created? Tav Chof Tes. How could God be king before anything was created? Asher Malach B'Terem Kol Yetzer Nivra, that he ruled, he was the king before anything was made. Okay, secondly, what does it mean to be a king? Even after everything was made, what does it mean to be a king? I mean, you can't be a king over rocks or trees or planets, even over angels. God has to be the king over something similar to himself. God is infinite. How can he be the king is infinite, right? It's almost like a person saying, I'm the king of my imagination, over my imagination. I rule over, here, look at, watch me, here, I'm just imagining now here, 10 million people standing in front of me, and they're all saying, long live the king. That's it, I'm the king. This world, compared to Hashem, is much further than an imagination of a person to his imagination, because at least imagination is a little bit of energy I expended in order to imagine something. But God, in order to create the world, he didn't expend any energy. It doesn't. God created the world from nothing. What tool did he use to create the world? So he used his names, his potential, his ability. We're talking about mystical things over here that don't really make any sense. I mean, this is above the spiritual. God did not change himself. God is not changeable. And he didn't create, so how did he create how was he creating it all the time? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, but nevertheless, there's nothing like God. We say, Ein Kelokeinu, there's nothing like that. So how can God be a king even after the world was created? The world is incomparable to God, right? It's incomparably more ridiculous to say that God is the king of the world than it is to say, I'm the king of my thoughts. Right, I'm the king. Watch this, right? I'm imagining 20 billion people standing in this big, huge place, and I am the king. They're all saying, long live the king. Huh? That proves I'm the king, right? What does it prove? How can it be that God is the king? What do you mean that we say that God is the king? Even to say that God is incomparable to the world, to say that incomparable means you might think he is comparable. It shows how far away we are. Right? It's like saying, how many numbers can you put, how much mathematics can you put in this hat? Like to fill it up right to the brim with mathematics. How much mathematics can you put in there? It's a sign the person doesn't understand what mathematics is. Right? It says a ridiculous thing like that. It says the same thing as with saying Hashem is the king of the world. You know, the king of the world. It's incomparable. It can't. It's like numbers, so it's comparing numbers to a hat. But you can't compare that. It's comparing the world, even the spiritual worlds, to Hashem. It shows you don't understand. Okay, so what does it mean we make God into a king? What's going on over here? What is going on? Okay. So I don't remember how far we got in this mimer, to tell you the truth, but maybe we should start from the beginning. Yes?
Interesting to me.
Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yetzer nivra. The master of the world that was the king before anything was made. Umedayak was a Kfar Chabad Mori Chami Admor, and the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the father-in-law of the Rebbe, learns from this in his Maimer Adon Olam. Behemshech HaMatchil, it's a long series of Maimorim that begins Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah. Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah. It's a whole series of Maimorim about Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbat. But by the way, the Maimer right before this in this book here that we have here is talking about also Yom Tov that falls on Rosh Hashanah. Where is this? Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbos. We spoke about that. Okay. When you coronate the king, and that's what we're doing on Rosh Hashanah, we're making God into a king, and we're declaring that God is the king. That's the whole idea of sounding the shofar and etc. Has to be b'simcha gadol. It has to be very happy. You have to be very happy, that you have the privilege to make God into a king of the world, king of the universe. Why? Because the king of the universe implies that God creates the universe, and it also implies that God cares about every detail of the universe. Right? God is a genuine, and they say at Balabai, is a genuine manager. Right? You have a manager of a company. If he's just interested in the money, but if the person is really genuine, is really talented, so he's interested in each and every person. I remember I had a friend, more exactly was my wife, a friend anyway, my wife had a friend, my friend was not my wife. I had a friend, and or more exactly, my wife had this family. And he had this big factory for making dough. I think he supplied like all the dough for Dunkin' Donuts or something like that. Big, huge factory. It was in Florida. And once he showed us, and then he sold the factory, but he showed us around the factory. And he knew all the workers. How you doing, Joe? How are you, Pedro? How's the family? Sam? You know, every single person he knew. Everyone, they were all happy to see him. I probably paid everybody on time. But nevertheless, he was, he knew the business. He knew what he was talking about. And he was friendly with all the people. Knew everything. Now, that's a real balabayas, a real, a manager. A real manager, every single detail he cares about. Well, that's what God is. God is a real manager. Right? And we see that also with the Rebbe. Same thing. Real, genuine tzaddikim, they care about every single detail. The Rebbe knew everybody's names and the names of their families and the names of the families' mothers and things like that. Incredible. Amazing detail that there was helping people. So that's why we should be very happy. We're making God a king. Right? Like I said, the world is not a jungle. God cares and he creates every detail. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The reason the Jews are the chosen people, one of the reasons the Jews are the chosen people, were chosen to tell the non-Jews how much God loves them. He creates them, protects them, gives them eyes to see, ears to hear, gives them life, provides food. Everything that's alive, God is, that's pretty good. That's a real genuine manager. And that's what the Jewish people do on Rosh Hashanah, is we make God a king. Of course, this requires a bit of faith. Amunah, you have to believe it's really happening. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't believe in God and they get along okay. I don't think there's too many governments in the world that are based on the fact that God creates and provides for everything. Even though America was supposed to be like that. In God we trust. But Tzorich Lav, we have to understand, how is it possible to say that God ruled before anything was created? A kingship can only be on others. Like it says that there cannot be a king without people, without a nation, subjects. And even more than this, the kingship can only be on those that are compared to him. Something in the same level. You can't be a king over cats, animals, dogs. Even if you train the dogs, you train the horses, right? There's certain animals that their nature is you can train them. They travel in packs or whatever, and they like leaders, so you can train them. But they're not. If a person rules, he's not a king over the horses, over the. The people have to be similar to the king. Velozu bilvad, and not only that, not only does rulership have to be on people, and not on animals, that even if a person has tens of thousands of animals that do everything that he says, he's not the king of them. He just has trained them very well. He's trained them. Also in people, unless you get animals that act like people, right? If you get animals that he says, okay, all the animals, I want you to stand on one leg. All the animals stand on one leg. What do you think? He's the king. They all have fear of him because he's the king. He trained them. He says, oh, no, watch this. Okay, everyone. You do it. Give them a problem. Give them a mathematical problem. Right? Okay, what is the square root of 3,600? All the animals sit down, they all start scratching on the ground. You go and they see the answers, they all have different answers, right?
So there needs to be some kind of communication.
There has to be some sort of the person, the subjects have to be something like the king. They have to be in some way like the king, especially in their intellect. They have to be intellectual. If it's just animals, animals can be trained. Animals are not thinking. They can't think, so to speak, except for their own survival. But they can't, what they say, think outside of the box. An animal cannot go outside of its nature. Can't change its nature. Right? A human being can change his nature, and therefore a king is ruler over all these people that they have free will, they can change their nature, they choose him to be the king, and they say from now on, whatever you say, we'll do.
What about the case of a lion? The lion is the king of something else.
He's just called the king of the jungle because he's the most majestic of all of the animals in the jungle. He has this big mane or whatever it is, and it looks like...
What if you're Shlomo Melech, and you can understand what the animals are saying?
What does it mean the animals are saying? He also says he could understand the trees, the wind coming through the trees, because everything that happens in the world is directed by God. God makes everything happen, right? So there's ways of, there's prophets. There were prophets who could tell what the future is going to be. Genuine prophets could tell what the future is going to be. There's also soothsayers and these other things. They could also, but they couldn't tell 100%. Prophets, they could tell. How do they know what's going to be? They have a sense of what's going to be. They have a sense. Well, King Solomon, let's say he wasn't a prophet, but he was a wise man. Wasn't even a wise man. He could sense from the different changes in the world, he could sense what's about to happen. They have weathermen, right? The weathermen, because they look at the relationship between the moon and the sun and the different magnetic things, whatever it is, and they can tell what the temperature is going to be. They can tell what the weather is going to be. They have weather balloons and things like that. So they can tell what's going to be. It's the same thing. God, and before he does things, he sends messages. The messages are in the wind. Like they say, the answer is blowing in the wind. There's a point to that. There's messages that come through. It says he could understand sichat ad-dakalim, how the wind coming through the palm trees, what that meant. You can understand what the birds were saying. What do birds have to talk about? What are birds talking about, right? They're making scientific conventions or something, medical journals, and they're comparing notes, Right. What did birds have to say? But because the way they were chirping, he could understand changes that were coming from God into the world. But it wasn't really speaking in a way that's a free will. I mean, unfortunately, most people also don't speak with free will. They just their lives are dictated by what happens around them. What happens around them, and that changes their nature. He wants to make money, so he's afraid of his boss. He keeps quiet. He sees something that he wants to eat, so he goes for it. It's dictated by his lower nature. A human being is supposed to be. You ever read the writings of the Greek? There's Plato and these people. That the ideal human beings, there's the regular human beings, and then there's different types of human beings. Then there's the workers, and there's the artistsmen and the craftsmen, and then there's the philosophers. The philosophers are supposed to be the people that they're detached from the whims or the influences of this world. Nothing makes them angry. Nothing makes them fall into lust. Their mind is dictated only by pure reason. By pure reason. Some of them can get pretty high. I mean, Aristotle was pretty, amazing. Kant and these people, they were pretty amazing. But none of them really took into account the Torah into their, whole conception of what reality is. So here we say the Torah says that on this day we make God a king, and God is made a king on, especially Rosh Hashanah. And we're praising God's kingship, and we say, God, you were the king before anything was created. Okay, number one, how could God be a king over nothing? It doesn't make any sense. So number two, even if he is a king after the world was created, nevertheless, Hine, gam b'bnei adam gufa, also in people, tzorech sheyeh ha'am is a sheichus v'dimyon l'melech. The people have to have some sort of a comparison to a king. Right? That was the whole idea of Napoleon came along and he said, the kings, they're stripping us of our humanity. We have to be human beings is liberty, fraternity. Right? And the kings are taking all this away from us. We can't make our own decisions. We have to do what the king says. So he made a war to get rid of the kings. That was one of his things. We're going to free the world from kings. There won't be any more kings. Everybody will be free to do what they want. Well, he had a little bit of a point. I mean, the point is a king is supposed to be someone that rules over people that are similar to him in some way. They have to be somewhat, and even the people that he does rule over, those people he rules over have to be similar to them. If the king hypnotizes everybody, or the king lobotomizes everybody, so everybody just walks around like zombies, he's not really a king. That's not a king. That's not a king. That's a controller, a dictator. Ki yadua she'am, the nation, the word am, ein melech b'lo am, comes from imo. He with him. Okay, Herschel. Eich yitach, how can it possibly be a kingship that God is the king? B'terem kol yitzur nivra. If a king can only be a king over something similar to him, then how can God be a king over nothing before anything was created? But he was. That's what we say in our prayers. So what's going on? And the previous Rebbe explains this. It was in a mimer in 1943. He said, Bahagdim, what it says in the Shlah. What does it say in the Shlah? The Shlah is a man called Yeshaya Horowitz. He was right before Chassidut, after the Arizal. Ubakamas Forim, Godel Hashevach, the Adon Olam, the great praises of Adon Olam. That this praise that we say Adon Olam is a very, very deep and great one. Fa'ad she'adon olam is the gematria Ein Sof. If you count up the letters of Adon Olam, you come to the exact same numerical value of Ein Sof. Right? Aleph is 1, Yud is 10, Nun. Adon Olam is the same gematria as Ein Sof. The Ein Sof, the whole. What is God Ein Sof? God is called Ein Sof. Ein Sof means that there's no end, there's no limit, no boundary. There's no, if you want to call it, definition. You cannot define God. Hu dar gahachi nalit belokut. This idea of, we call God Adon Olam, this is the highest level of godliness that we can ascribe to God. And even more. It's above any sort of levels. If you read the writings of the Arizal, it's written also in a lot in the writings of the previous Rebbe's father, the fifth Rebbe, Ayin Beis, Samach Vav, where it talks about great length about levels of godliness before what's called the Tzimtzum, before God created Atzilut, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. The Amitit Inyan Ein Sof is Ba'atzmuto Yisberech, is in God's essence. Okay, we have this question, what does it mean, God's essence? We have a big question, right? If God is really infinite, and He is, it's not God, saying God is infinite is meaningless. God has no definition, but God, we know one thing for sure, He created the world. Here we are in the world, and we know also that He gave the Torah, and God took the Jews out of Egypt. Now this is sort of a big contradiction. If God is really infinite, it means that God has no will. He's got no anything. But God is not finite. You can't define Him. So how can it be that He has a will and He has a wisdom? And then in Chassidus they say we give God pleasure. When we do His will, we give Him pleasure. And God is kind and God is severe and God has this. And if you look in the Bible, it says the hand of God, the eyes of God. In the whole Bible, God is talking. God says to Moses, He must have a mouth. God must have a tongue. What does that mean? That's not, isn't that blasphemous? How can you say something like that? God has a tongue. That's the opposite of Judaism.
But infinite means that we don't understand it. doesn't mean that God doesn't understand it, because God creates infinite.
Right, so God is not infinite, He creates infinite. So they say, there's a book which is called the Avodat HaKodesh by Rev, Meir Gabai. And he said that if you say that God is only infinite and He's not, He can't make Himself finite, then you limit His infiniteness. So God has somehow or other, and in the Tanya explains that this is as incomprehensible as God's infiniteness is incomprehensible. God has this ability to, I want to call it, articulate Himself, to create worlds. He has a will. God has a will. And God's will is expressed in this amazing process, which is written in the Kabbalistic books of the Arizal, Rav Yitzchak Luria, of this amazing process of how He creates the world, how He creates the spiritual worlds, the preparations for the spiritual creation. But all of that is what God does. What about Hashem Himself? Says Hashem Himself in the Shalah Kodesh, He says, this book, the Shalah, Shnei Luchot HaBrit it's called, so that is, and he was a big Kabbalist. A lot of Chabad is based on his teachings and that is the essence name of God. That's the highest possible name of God you can have. He says is Ein Sof. According to this, we can explain what is Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'terem Kol Yetzer Nivra. Adon Olam is the same numerical value, what's called gematria, as Ein Sof, as this essence name of God. Demekivan she'Adon Olam is in the gematria, it's in the numerical value of Ein Sof. Harimuvan, it's understood, the Inyan Adon Olam Asher Malach, that this whole idea of the master of the world that was the king, and the master of the world, Adon Olam, means Ein Sof. This is the level of kingship of God, Kamosha Mushreshet, as it is rooted, Kiviyachol Ba'atzmuto, in God's essence. Emitit Inyan Ein Sof, in God's Ein Sof. What's this mean? What's this talking about? Let's start from the bottom, right? The worst type of science is what we call, I don't even know what they call it, extrapolation from the result to the beginning.
The worst kind of science?
The worst type of science, right?
The kind of science is you have a theory and then you go and find evidence to prove it.
No, but that's true science. True science is
No, true science is the opposite of that.
One second. True science is you have a theory and you try to prove it. You see if is it are you proving it or not? You have to be honest. Is it proving it or not? Right? Bad science is there's no theory. You see you have a fact, and from this fact you extrapolate reverse, and you say, for instance, theory of evolution. It's not a theory. It's a religion, right? You see there's all this diversity in the world. You say, oh, look, here's a lizard with a tail. Here's a lizard without a tail. Here's a lizard with only 3 legs. The one with 3 legs doesn't have any children because he's extinct. So therefore the 4-legged lizards only want to marry 4-legged lizards. And therefore that's how 4-legged, then you can see
I think you're describing engineering within science.
And
science is, you don't know where it's going to take you.
That's right.
Engineering is you have this idea and you want to prove it.
One second.
And you find information that supports your
that's science.
That's not science. That's engineering.
I don't know. I never heard this before. You see what the world is. You have a theory of evolution, right? You have a theory of evolution. Where did the theory of evolution come from? Where did it come from, right? You see how the world is, it's how diverse. You make a theory.
Because you observed the data.
Right. And then you go extrapolate to what was the cause. What is the principle that this is all based on? And you go and you look backwards to see what it is. Therefore, you can conclude from our carbon testing, whatever it is, that the world was like this, and people must have come from apes, and apes came from dogs, and dogs came from tadpoles, and tadpoles came from this. Because you can look and see, right? So here we're saying almost the same thing. What are we saying? Here we have a world. Let's extrapolate backwards. How did the world get here? Well, I'm a religious Jew, so I say God made it. How in the world did he make the world? How it is it? What is God? God is like this big biblical figure that's sitting up in the sky. No. God is infinite. So if he's infinite, how did he make the world? How did he do it? So there were great people. There were great people like the Arizal and other Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and these other people that were revealed to them secrets. There were revealed to them secrets. You with me, Herschel? There were revealed to them the secret processes of how the world was created. Why? What do we care about this? Why do we care about this? Because then we can start to understand what's called the Sod, the secrets of the Torah. The mysteries of the Torah. We can start understanding every single word. If you ever read the little bit of the Zohar is a midrash. It takes sentences of the Torah and explains. Right, different sentences. The same basic thing is also in the writings of the Arizal. He takes a sentence from the Torah and he explains, right, this is what it means. Or he says something and then he says, this is what this sentence means. In a deep way, in a mysterious, in a what we call Kabbalistic way. We're talking about creating the world. How did God create the world? So he says, God created the world from this aspect of his kingship. And the kingship, as it is included in God's infiniteness, before the world was created, the potential to be a king, it was there. And that's what we mean, Adon Olam, that God is the king before anything was made. It's the potential of God to being created, what we call Malchut, the kingship of Ein Sof. Here we go. The Inyan Adon Olam Asher Malach, Hu Bechinat Malchut, this is the level of God's kingship. Kamo, like Shemushreshet, it is rooted Ba'atzmuto, in God's essence. Somehow or other, as infinitely not understandable as God is, but equally not understandable is what we call God's personality, or we call it the 10 Sfirot. And mitit inyan Ein Sof, the true inyan of Ein Sof is that God has the ability to, or the nature, whatever we want to call it, of 10 Sfirot. 10 Sfirot means that God has a personality. That's what it says, that man is made in God's image. Man has intellect, man has emotions, man has thought, speech, action. So to speak, that is all in the image of God's, what's called his Sfirot, his spheres. Mikiven she'atzmuto, since God's essence is totally able to do anything, God is not limited in any way. Shayach sheyeh melech gam belo am, therefore he can be a king without a nation. He can be a king without any servants, without any subjects. B'terem kol yitzur livra, because he has all potential. Potential. Now this is it's called the secret of the 10 Sfirot is called the secret of faith. Why is it that people believe in all these weird things? You go to the Hindu religion, the Buddhist religion, right? There's some wonderful ideas, really. Fantastic ideas about what God is. But somewhere in the middle over there, they worship these powers. Or they worship people. Right? They worship people.
Cows.
They worship cows, they worship this. Okay, how did this come? Okay, you can say things are holy. Let's say, they don't really worship the cows. The cows are holy. So I was in India, and I asked some people. I got some different answers. I mean, I really never delved into it too deeply, but some of them say the cows are holy, and some of them say they're incarnations. They're incarnations of people that lived before, and therefore you have to treat them honorably. Honorably. I guess they also treat each other honorably for the same reason. I don't know.
Not the Indians.
No, I don't know.
You ever deal with Indians?
No, I don't know. We'll talk about that some other time. Well, eventually, if we talk about that enough, we'll get around to the elections. So.
And that proves.
Right.
That's science.
So what it says that the secret of the 10 Sfirot is the secret of faith. Faith. It was everyone in the world, not just the Jews, everyone in the world is supposed to believe only in the Creator. It's one of the 7 Noahide commandments. The non-Jews are supposed to believe only in the Creator that's creating them. That's what they're supposed to believe in. If it helps them to believe in the Creator, that they believe in God who created the moon, God who created this cow, God who created these things. So they have to have this go-between. So they're not punished for that. But they're not supposed to do it. And non-Jews are supposed to worship only the creator of the universe. The problem is it's a little bit sort of spacey. If you believe in a person, so then the person, he came to me in a dream, I saw, I went, I this, I went. The idea of holiness and people that can encourage you, teachers, inspirers, that's what Moses was. That's what Avraham was, right? Especially Moshe. He led the people to worship only God. When the people they left Moshe, they worshiped the golden calf. Right? So there has to be a Moshe in every generation that serves as an example to serve God. But what's the point of serving God? Right? I mean, does God really care? Yes, He does. God has a personality. God personally cares. God is kind. God is severe. God is beautiful. God is balanced. God is just. Right? God is involved. God does things in the world. He did take the Jews out of Egypt. He really does care about you. He cares about all of His creations. But that's the 10 Sfirot, to show that God is involved with the world. He cares about the world. It's not just He created the world a long time ago from His supernatural, transcendental powers or whatever, and the world just sort of casts along. And if you want to get in touch with Him, plug in. Not, okay, die in the darkness. No, God is creating everyone all the time, constantly. And all those things that God is above the world, certainly that's true. But God is not limited to being above the world. So that's what we're saying. That's our declaration here. That God is a king, a genuine leader. He cares about every single detail, a real king. He cares about every single person, every single plant, every animal. God cares about. That's called God's kingship. And this aspect of God's kingship was there before He even created the world, before there was time. Okay, what does this mean, before there was time? I mean, if there was no time, there can't be before, right? There can't be before there was time. There was no time. How could there be before? Okay, we'll talk about this. But suffice it to say, I mean, everybody has a question. God created the world, so the world is going to end. So what's the whole point of the thing? Now, every deed that we do is infinite. We look at the world in a way of time. It happened here, it happened there, and then all of a sudden it's going to stop. Right? It's all going to stop. And so what's the whole purpose of the whole business? So the answer is, what the purpose of the business is right now is the purpose. Now is the purpose. Every good thing that a person does right now is infinite. That's how you get the idea of heaven and hell and stuff like that. There is heaven and hell. I don't know how exactly it works, but there is such a thing. How the Rambam says, we don't know how God judges what's considered to be good, what's considered to be better, how one good deed can knock out all the bad ones, one bad thing can knock out all, who knows. So don't worry about it. Now, what you're supposed to do is do as much good and do the truth because it's true. And that's infinite. That's something that's infinite. So we don't have to think about that. That's what it means making God a king. That's why God is a king. The same way God doesn't exist for anything else. When we do what God wants, so we don't exist for anything else. We just attach to the truth. We're just creations. And we have the ability to make God a creator. Incredible. This is astounding. Right? We have the ability to make God into the creator. Make Him into the king. We coronate God.
But He already is. He has that potential.
But not in relation to the world. Right? To make the world a different place. The whole world is in our hands, so to speak. Sounding of the shofar. Hine. Me'achar sin sebo. Huh? Maimar, I'm sorry. Hine, Maimar zebo. This Maimar that the previous Rebbe said comes behemshech in a continuation of the Maimar which we said before, and it's also here the same thing. Yom Tov shel Rosh Hashanah shecholios b'Shabbos. A Yom Tov, if Rosh Hashanah falls to be on Shabbos, is a Mishnah in Mishnayos Rosh Hashanah. Shabo Mevaer, it explains in long length the idea of the sounding of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, sounding of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah is such a tremendously important thing that we... The sounding of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah is in Klali. This has a general effect on the whole Judaism on the whole world, on the whole universe, on all time, plays shekolel kol prati avoda kol hashana, and includes all of the service that we serve God the whole rest of the year. Like I said, the whole rest of the year, all we're doing is saying in every commandment, Melech Olam, Melech, God is the King of the universe. So Rosh Hashanah is the day when it begins. Inyan Tikiyat Shofar, the whole idea of sounding the shofar is like we say, Omer Lefanai Rosh Hashanah, say in front of me on Rosh Hashanah, Malchiot, sentences of kingship, Kadei Shetamlichuni Aleichem, so that I will rule over you, Ubameh Ubishofar, in the shofar. It used to be, if you look in the Gemara and you look also in the Mishnayos, it used to be that the sounding of the shofar was only done in the Musaf prayer. That's when the shofar was sounded. And it was added, they would sound the shofar also after the reading of the Torah. That's called Tkiyas Miyushav. They could sit down. But the main, if you look in the Gemara also, it talks about when is the sounding of the shofar is when you say these three prayers, these three blessings in the Musaf prayer of Rosh Hashanah. 10 of these sentences that we say 3 groups of 10 sentences from the Torah. The first group of 10 sentences we say, this is in the Musaf prayer of Rosh Hashanah, Musaf. The first group of 10 sentences that we say, they're all grouped together in one blessing, it's called Malchiot. 10 sentences that prove God is a king. Kadei shetamlichuni aleichem, in order to make me rule over them. Umikiven the call it tzivuyim, since all of the commandments, mitzvahs, are relevant only after God is a king, you cannot do the will of the king unless there's a king. So first of all, we have to make a king. Kamaimor kiblo malchutai. First of all, receive my kingship. Okay, Herschel, techila va'achakach, and afterwards, agzor aleichem gezeros, I will make decrees on you. Ari, she'avodah the kriyat shema, tkiyat shofar, that the sounding of the shofar, she'inyanu utam lichuni aleichem, he shorish l'kol mitzvahs. This whole sounding of the shofar, which makes God a king, this is the foundation of all Judaism, of all the commandments. Shebameshach kol hashana, the course of the rest of the year. U'mavo'er sham, and it's explained to inyan shetam lichuni aleichem, that this whole idea of make me a king over you, which we do by means of sounding the shofar, is hamshachat haratzon lemelucha, drawing down, evoking, arousing God's will to be a king. Arousing God's will to be a king. Bedugmat hachtarat, something like the coronation of a king of flesh, a human king. Sheba b'simcha gadola, is the day of the coronation is a tremendous joy. Ubebitul atzum el hamelech, and with tremendous surrender to the king. Long live the king. Yechi hamelech David. Long live the king. You see in the Haftorah, Sha'al ziyadei zeh mitorer hamelech beratzon lachfotz b'melucha. By means of this, it arouses in the king the desire to be a king. There's a difference between a king and a dictator, a melech and a moshel. Memshala, that God rules, or a person rules, he rules by force. By force. A king rules, the people want the king. They want the king. It could be that there's always in a group, see, read the history of England especially, there's always these revolutions and things. But the main thing of a king is that the people want the king. Long live the king. They want the king. A dictator is not that way. A dictator takes over and he rules. He rules over the people. By force. A different type of a rulership. Well, on Rosh Hashanah, we want to make God a king. We want to say that we want you to rule over us. You know better than we do. Right? If we rule over on ourselves, we'll be like sheep without a shepherd. Right? Feels great for a little while, and all of a sudden it just goes berserk. Everything just goes crazy. Right? People, everybody's running around, doing what they want to. Anarchy. We want you, God, to be the king. That's the ideal rulership in the world. That's the ideal rulership. Because nowadays there are no people that are fit to be kings, and there was a long history of really bad kings in Europe and things like that, very selfish people. So therefore the whole idea of really monarchy has been more or less abolished. I mean, officially abolished. The Queen of whatever is England and Denmark and these places, they don't really have any total power. They don't have total power like they used to.
It's got a bad name.
Right? Yeah, got a bad name, right. The Russian Revolution. Revolution got a good name. All of a sudden a revolution became the big thing. But we say no. The Jewish people say no. There's a king. And we want the king to rule over us. That's one of the many reasons, but possibly the main reason, why people don't like the Jews. Because even if the Jews are not religious and they side with the enemy and they say, we don't want any ruling, or we'll decide what we want to do, and who are these rabbis anyway, and who are these, etc., and I'm a rabbi, and everybody does what they want to, right? Nevertheless, every Jew, without exception, has deep down inside of himself the potential to declare God a king. And he wants to do it. Trotsky, right? The revolutionary, murderer, anarchist, whatever you want to call him, right? Inside I once saw a interview with him. He said, I guess you have to say that I'm a Jew. I'm not a religious Jew. I'm an atheistic Jew. I'm a Jew. What I say as a Jew? What do you have to say as a Jew? Say, my parents were Jewish, but totally have no connection. I would say, I don't even care what my parents were, it makes no difference. The whole thing is just superstition. I'm a human being. I'm a communist. No, he couldn't say it. He had to say, what religion are you? He could have said, I'm no religion. There's no such thing. It's just a big mistake. No, he didn't say that. He says, I'm a Jew, I don't believe, I'm this, and he had to explain. Because every Jew down deep wants to coronate God. He knows that God already is the king. And he wants to accept God as the king, to make to put the kingship in action. That's the idea of Rosh Hashanah. Ella, but what? Says Atam Shabavodas Yisrael Ma'oreres Etzlo Ratzon L'Melucha. How can the Jewish people possibly arouse in God the will to be a king? A king can only be a king over people that are like him. It says because that's exactly it. Because the king wants to be a king. The will of the king is there concealed. That's what is Adon Olam Asher Malach. That's what it means that God was the king before anything ruled. God has the desire to be a king. He wants the Jewish people to make him a king. He wants them to do it. But he can't do it. If he forces it, that's not being a king. That's being a dictator. Avodah Yisrael and the service of the Jewish people. Let's just a little bit more. Yes. Asib, Avodah Yisrael, Mamshichim, Aratzon, and the Jewish people, they draw down God's will from concealment to being revealed. Why? Asibah, the reason sheyesh ratzon nelam lamelucha, that God has a concealed desire to be a king. Lefisha inyan haratzon lamelucha yeshno gam lifnei. Because God's desire to be a king existed before it was revealed. Lifnei ratzon anelam. It was there. The will, God's will to be a king, was there even before it was in potential, even before it was ratzon anelam. Ratzon amuchlat. This is what's called absolute desire. Ba'atzmuto, in God's essence. Part of God's essence is to be a king. That's what it means. He was a king before anything was created. Adon Olam is Ein Sof. And this desire of God to be a king is part of God's essence. Does this make any sense? Doesn't, but that's the fact. That's why there's a world here. This world is here because God wants there to be a world in his essence. And this essence of God that wants there to be a world, this essence of God, it's above time. It wasn't, this is just a level of reality. As we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. For a bit of